welcome everybody to our April gathering of the Bridges Project, Ocala, Marion County. And let's take a moment and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, guys. Thank you to everybody for being here this morning. Let's take a moment of silence as we recognize all of those that have gone on as a result of the coronavirus. The numbers, I understand, are getting better as more and more people get vaccinated. But for those that we have lost and for those that we know, let's take a moment of silence. Okay, thank you all. I don't want to string out unnecessarily any time. So without further ado, I shall turn this over to Mr. Mike Mack, and he can introduce our speaker for today. If you would, Mike.
Yes, our speaker for today is Mr. Wayne Livingston. He is the coordinator of student services for Marion County. I know he's also been a principal, and he and I have had some fantastic conversations. He grew up in New York, and so he brings that experience here to Florida. And all the people that have actually worked with him that I know have basically said great and very positive things about him. And so I thank Mr. Livingston for taking the time to come and share with us today. And I hope that we can establish some avenues where we can basically work together to accomplish some things to benefit the parents and the students of Marion County. And with that, I'll just go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Livingston. Thank you, sir, for joining us this morning.
Well, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Mack, for the introduction. And I, too, enjoyed the conversations that we have had. I want to say that I'm here in the capacity of a parent who has been involved in the Marion County school system as an employee. So I have had the luxury, I would say, to be exposed to information that I think in general, a lot of people are not aware of, but yet it is in plain view. And so I hope that whatever we share today with one another is something in which when we leave and go back to our communities, when we talk with individuals, we can pass that information on to them. I know from previous experiences at different schools, we will have different events. And unfortunately, the numbers would not be great. And people around me would get nervous and say, oh my gosh, we only have 5 people in the audience. We only have 20 people in the audience. Why don't we have hundreds? Because we have hundreds of parents. And I simply would say to them, hey, don't panic, don't worry. If we can plant seeds in the 5 that we have here, those 5 can plant seeds in 5, and that 5, they can spread on and on and on. So, and that's how information gets out. Unfortunately, many times people don't seek information until there's a problem. And one of the things I want to key in on today is, people need to get ahead of it by talking with certain people that can help prevent a problem. And I'll be more specific in a few minutes. I do want to say this as well. My role, as Mr. Mack said, is student service coordinator. I am one of three in this particular office. And essentially what we do is we review expulsion packets and alternative placement packets to ensure that they are in line with the student code of conduct per the Marion County School Board. And if they're not in line with the student code of conduct, then we reject them, or we advise, some other things for schools to consider as an alternative to a placement outside of their school or an expulsion from the Marion County Public School System. Also, our role as student coordinator is to assist adults and students. When I say adults, I'm referring to parents or guardians who have questions about policies and procedures. I find, unfortunately, many people are totally unaware of their rights. And when I talk with parents, I step into that neutral zone of saying, hey, I want you to go to the Student Code of Conduct. Here are the pages I want you to review. And then I want you to go to the principal or either director of student services and address the issue and based on the policies and procedures. And in many cases, the parents will call back and say, wow, I didn't know that it exists. I didn't know I had the right to question an out of school suspension. I didn't know I had a right to a hearing. And I'm like, yes, it's right there in plain view. But if you don't know, you don't know. And as I'm talking, if you want to ask a question or anything, please just jump right in. I don't have a problem with that. I just want to have a heart-to-heart talk with everyone. I'm not wearing a suit and tie. I don't want to come in that capacity. And I think Miss Julius Edwards, Miss Francine could attest to that. Even when I was on campus at Lakewood High School, I had a full open door policy. Come in, we sit down and we talk. And I would talk as a principal, but also I would take that hat off and talk as a father. And so I would juggle the perspectives from my viewpoint around so I can get a better understanding of what the situation really was that I was dealing with. There are, like I said, some questions that were given to me, and some of them I can answer, and some of them I really can't answer and feel confident that my answer is 100% correct. And in those cases, I will redirect you to the individual or individuals or department that can actually answer the question. The very first question that I received was, how does the Marion County school system plan to treat these children as far as grading this year? And what assessments will be used to ensure this grading is a true assessment of their skills? Well, unfortunately, the pandemic has created a situation that is new and foreign to not just Marion County, but to school officials around the world. I think when it comes to answering this question, I would defer this to Jennifer Beck, and I will give you the number, but Jennifer Beck is in charge of elementary education and curriculum, and she is the best person to find out more about the assessment component. I would say that when you talk about truly assessing a student's skill, that has always been a challenge, even before the pandemic. For the mere fact, if we really look at it honestly, Florida's state assessment test and the former FCAT assessment test, they in and of itself was they are very challenging assessment tools. And I know there were times when people actually had adults take the assessment test and did not perform well. And it didn't mean that the adults were not well versed in education. It just meant that for that moment when they took the test, they didn't perform well. And what I'm really saying is this: when we look at assessment tools, we have to keep in mind they're just that, a tool. It doesn't mean they're the end all be all. And I am very happy to hear that the state this year has decided that due to the pandemic, school districts, I believe, will have the option of using the test or using other assessment tools at their disposal to determine whether a student graduates from high school or if a student is retained or if a student is retained in third grade. Because in years past, it was the assessment test from the state that determined promotion from third grade or graduation. But this year, because of the pandemic and the complexities that came along with it, schools will, I believe, and this came out, I believe, yesterday, will have more discretion in determining who can move on and who cannot move on. I know when I was principal at Evergreen Elementary School, we didn't only rely upon the state assessment test, but we also had what we call portfolios, in which we would get samples of students' accomplishments throughout the year or tests throughout the year. And we could use that to determine their ability to perform at the next grade level. To say it's an exact science, I personally, in my opinion, would not say it's an exact science because there are so many variables. Mr. Mack and I had a conversation, and I was sharing with him about growing up in New York City in a little small community called Harlem. And I was sharing with him about IQ tests and how on an IQ test, they were asked what is the color of a banana, and for a certain type of IQ test, and they want to know the color of a banana. And obviously we all would say yellow, and but some kids would say brown. And at first I was like, why is that a critical piece when you talk about an IQ test? Because for me, growing up in New York City, by the time the bananas made it from Central America or Florida or wherever they were coming from, they may not have been yellow when they sat in the store. So by the time I got to the store, my personal experience was to look at and see a brown or a brownish banana, or a banana with a lot of spots on it due to ripening. So if someone had asked me back then, what color is a banana? Well, if I didn't see it on Sesame Street or one of those other places, to be exposed to it, my answer simply would have been a banana is brown, or it is brownish with black spots on it, or something of that nature. So when I talk with people about intelligence, I caution them to say, let's not just rely solely on the test to determine the intelligence of a child. Let's look at some other things, such as having a simple one-on-one conversation. Watching students at play, watching children at play at home can cue you into a lot of things about the intelligence of an individual. I know in talking with parents, especially at the elementary level, when we talk about reading and when is a child ready to read, and they thought I was really joking at first when I would make the comment of, when you're driving down the street and you have the baby in the car seat and you drive past McDonald's, and suddenly you're making a U-turn into the parking lot of McDonald's because that baby demanded that you go to McDonald's, chances are that child can pick up on symbols and you can start teaching them reading. Because when you think about reading, you're looking at deciphering letters and coding. And if they can drive down the road and recognize that that McDonald's emblem means food, it means something, and they can communicate that to you.
It used to do it.
You can actually sense, yeah, show
They are pretty much ready to begin reading. And I've seen children at very young ages, and people will say, well, of course yours read at a young age because you're in the system. No, I spent time with them, and I didn't treat them as if they were not ready. I didn't put a ceiling on them. Now, why am I saying this to this group? Because once again, I'm hoping that you can go out and talk to individuals, even within your family, and say, hey, I know this child is only 2 years old, 3 years old. Read to them like they're an adult. Don't necessarily talk baby talk or gibberish, because their minds are literally like brand new computers that have not been programmed yet, and everything around them they're taking in. And to be quite honest with you, I often said to myself, I wonder who's smarter here. Is it the baby I'm holding in my arm or me? I think I'm only smart compared to the child based on experiences, but that child is literally deciphering everything that comes out of my mouth. And even though I can't understand what the child is saying, the child is learning the language that I'm speaking. So with that being said, when do you think is the best time to teach a child a foreign language? Not in high school. Really is when they're very young. Their mind is open. That hasn't been cluttered with things that would stop that information from coming in and being processed. Oh, I just saw something in the chat that said, please mute yourself. And I was thinking, wow, is that for me? I'm talking and boring people to death already.
Not you, not you.
Okay. But, and the same thing goes for music. When you want to teach a child an instrument, my recommendation is start young, start very young when the mind is open and hasn't been sealed yet due to a lot of information coming in. And the best analogy I can give you, and forgive me if it's a poor analogy, when you look at your cell phone, when you get it, when it's new, it's very fast. It moves quickly. It takes in information and it works really well. But give it a few years, you will notice the performance starts to slow down. And that's because it is cluttered with a lot of information already. And it's hard for it to take in more. So when I look at children and I look at assessment tests, there's a lot more to it than just the assessment test. My greatest fear when I was a principal at Evergreen Elementary School was an assistant principal at Saddlewood and assistant principal at Pheasant, where kids were coming in and being judged too quickly by adults. And I'm looking at the child thinking, man, the world is right there for you and we just have to reach you. And we have to convince parents and guardians. Now, one thing I used to tell the teachers, and I still tell school officials when I reach out to them, is we can't do anything about the home setting. We can't go into the home and change the environment. Growing up in New York City and Harlem, my teachers didn't come home and with me or with my friends to change the environment. They focused on what they could do during the 6 hours they had us on their campus, and they gave us a lot of hope. And with that being said, one of the reasons I see that students tend to fail is at some point they lose hope. And if you think about it as an adult, when you feel down and out and you don't see a way to achieve whatever it is you were trying to achieve, you start to shy away from it. You tend to get away from it and you give up and you find other things to take its place. There was a study where they had a rat and they put rats in a little container filled with water, and they did two things. They turned the lights off and the rat could no longer see the edges of the container, and in most cases the rat drowned. Why? Because it couldn't see the edge, so it gave up on hope. But in the cases where the light was still on, the rat could see the edges and make its way to the edge because it still had hope. So when I look at students and I look at kids coming in pre-K and kindergarten, they are just so bubbly and alive. And they're looking around at their peers and they're starting to wonder, well, something is different about me. Something, this kid knows about the alphabet, or the kid can sing this song, or these other kids can, recognize colors. Why can't I? But as educators, as adults, we have to still inspire them to learn the language or to learn colors and so forth. But it's also our job as educators to reach out to the adults at home or in the community to say, hey, can you assist us as well with the colors? Because kids, if they can sing a rap song, or if they can sing something that's, out of the music world and recite it word for word, then I know they can read. I know they can do certain things that we are challenging them to do at school. It's all a matter of motivation and trying to motivate students. When I see a question in the chat room, why do you think Marion County Public Schools shy away from race-related curriculum, fear, denial, or both? I think you will find, and I'm very pleased to say this, and I say this once again as a parent, not as a school official, that you will find that our superintendent and deputy superintendent, they are looking into ways of improving race relations within the school system. And as a matter of fact, there is a committee that has recently been formed, and we will start talking about cultural sensitivity and race relations. As far as curriculums, I am not too familiar with race-related curriculums because they have to be carefully vetted to make sure that they are appropriate for the various age levels, from middle school, elementary, and high school. So I don't think that we are in denial as a school system. I look at the school board, and the school board is very sensitive towards race relations. And so is our superintendent and our deputy superintendent as well. So I think that's going to definitely be a plus from this point going forward with Marion County Public Schools. Will there be challenges? Yes, there always will be challenges, but I do believe that now with having more involvement from the communities as well, opening up opportunities for members from the community to come in and be a part of decision-making is going to be paramount to the success of our school system. Recently, we just finished the Code of Conduct review, and that was very exciting because it wasn't done in isolation where it was just a group of administrators or school officials sitting down talking about school board policies when it comes to the student code of conduct and discipline. It involved members from the community as well. And most importantly, it involves students coming in. High school students had an opportunity to also talk about discipline and the student code of conduct and what they thought was important, and you know, how we should attack things such as dress code violations and other things of that nature. So I believe right now we are in a cycle where things are very inclusive to get outside support and input to make decisions regarding what is happening within Marion County Public Schools. Also, discipline-wise, we have the PBIS, which stands for Positive Behavior Intervention Support. And with that, is helping schools come up with better discipline plans and educational plans for students. And that's going to be a big piece for our school system going forward. We've had it in the past, and I think unfortunately in the past, it focused more on tangible items such as token system economies, where if a student did something right, you give them what is called an educational buck. At Evergreen, we call it the Eagle Buck because our mascot was the eagle. But it has evolved more to being tailored to the needs of individual schools based on the communities the schools serve and the cultural aspects of the school. So it's not a primarily give them an award every time they do something right. It's a lot more than that. And it's more or less changing the mindset of how we look at things within the school system. But the key component of it is it involves the community now.
You entered 433. This meeting ID does not exist. Please re-enter your meeting.
Okay. Yes, it does involve incentives, but incentives are not the driving force here. The thing about incentives, we caution school officials with incentives being driven by the adults. Sometimes we can go into a room and sit down and say, well, what do you think the kids will really work for? What do you think they really want? And, you know, me being 57, I might operate off of the mindset of something that took place in 1970 in the 70s or 80s that I wanted, but the kids today will not find as an incentive. So we discovered that, hey, you know, if we're going to incentivize a program, maybe it's best if we get the kids involved in it. What do you want? What do you find will be rewarding? Because, you know, I can tell you this as a child, and I think I shared this with you, Mr. Mack, my sisters and I, whenever we would get into trouble and discipline was being initiated in the home, with me, what worked was if you showed me the belt, I was instantly going to behave. I was going to change my behavior. My attitude started changing right away. But I had a sister, you show her the belt, she didn't care. You can spank her and spank her and spank her, and she would bite her bottom lip just to be defiant. But with her, what worked was stop her from going outside to play, restrict her from that. And that was very effective. Well, in the school systems, when we look at discipline, we have to caution people that discipline and punishment are not the same thing. And that is, punishment is truly when you're mad and you're seeking revenge based on something someone has done. Where discipline, you're really trying to teach a child an alternative way to doing things. Now, there is a fine line, and they can look like they're one and the same in some cases. I know in the days when corporal punishment was instituted in our schools, and I know when, as a principal, when I would administer corporal punishment, it was not the 2 swats, even though legally we were allowed to swat a student 3 times. It was not the 2 swats that the students feared the most when it came to me. They didn't like the long, drawn out conversations before it, and then the long, drawn out conversations afterwards. Because everything, when you do something in terms of discipline with a student, or with an adult for that matter, you have to spend time explaining why it occurred. Why did we take away certain privileges? Why were you restricted from something? Because if you don't explain it, they walk away not knowing what was truly wrong. But we as adults, we tend to say, oh, you know what you did that was wrong. You spilled the milk on the carpet. Well, we saw the milk being spilled on the carpet. Well, not spilled, but being poured intentionally onto the carpet. And so we said, we're going to discipline you for that. But did we fully explain to the child why that action was wrong? And sometimes, you know, we take it for granted thinking that they understand. And in all honesty, they don't understand. And I find that to be true of adults too. Sometimes we take it for granted that this adult should know better. And you're right, they should know better if they're an adult. But the reality is sometimes they don't know better, and we have to teach them, and we have to explain why. And we have to get away from this do as I say, not as I do mindset. And I've shared with teachers, you cannot tell a child not to be a bully and say bad things about other people, but yet you're in the hallway and you're having conversations that can be overheard by a child that sounds very similar to what a group of girls or group of boys did yesterday in the hallways in reference to their peers. So, you know, we have to be role models, and that's true for all of us, not just in the school system, but outside in the communities. And once again, you know, I share with you that when you go back and you talk with individuals in the community or individual parents, they have to understand that their kids, their children are live, walking, talking, video tape recorders. Well, I shouldn't even say tape recorders because we're not in the age of using tape anymore, but they are constantly recording everything they see and hear, and they are imitating it and emulating it. And we wonder, well, I never taught you to lie. No, you may not have taught them to lie, but if you took them to the movie theater and you said, well, he's only 10, the child is recording that. He's heard that, he's seen that, and guess what? You inadvertently taught that child how to lie. And these are things that sometimes we just simply don't think of. And I'm saying this also as a professional. Sometimes we don't think about certain things, but yet it is impacting student behavior. So with that being said, I see in the chat on a scale, how accountable are teachers when evaluating students for suspension? Are they considered part of the problem, or like law enforcement, are they removed from responsibility and accountability for being part of the escalation? They're actually now being definitely held accountable. We are having conversations right now looking at what we call pivot tables. And with pivot tables, basically it's a discipline report on each school. And we drill down into that particular table, looking at where the disciplinary actions are, the infractions are taking place. Whose classroom is it taking place in? We look at the number of male versus females. We look at race. We look at age. We look at so many different factors to try to drill down into it to figure out what is the root cause of the discipline that is taking place in a particular setting. And yes, teachers are held accountable. If we see that a teacher has a particularly high rate of referrals to the discipline office, we question. Now, when I say accountable, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be disciplined, because sometimes it is an accurate picture of what's going on in the classroom setting, and we have to make adjustments for that. We have to counsel with the teachers and say, okay, if you have a high rate of referrals coming from your classroom, and we have to look at how did we arrange the setup of the classroom in terms of who's going into that setting? Did we set the classroom up for failure? Did we put a number of students in a particular setting that have conflicts? And to clarify that, when scheduling at the end of the year, we meet with grade level teachers and we talk about who should go where in terms of, can student A get along with student B? Who should be separated in the next year when we're putting them in classroom settings? And it's amazing to hear, well, there's just no way you can have Johnny and Sally in the same room, because they're like oil and water. They're going to fight. They're going to be disruptive. So those things are put into play. There's a lot going into looking at evaluating suspensions, because we want to know why students are being suspended now. And it's not that we didn't want to know in the past, but I think people are more open now. Our superintendent is very open about looking into why are students being suspended from school? Why are students being alternatively placed? Why are they being expelled from schools? And after it passes through our filter, often other eyes are looking at it as well, just to see if we've missed something. Because, you know, in all honesty, we know that if a child is suspended from school, it reduces the chances of them having success in school. Same thing for alternative placement and expulsions. So there are a lot of eyes now really being open and paying attention to what's going on when it comes to discipline and suspensions from school. I will submit this to you as parents or as concerned citizens. Become very familiar with the student code of conduct. It is online. It is on the Marion County Public School webpage. And when I say familiar, you don't have to go through it, you know, from front to back, but look at look at it and figure out what is necessarily important to you, and then meet with the principal. A lot of times when I take phone calls, the question that I ask is, have you met with the principal? And unfortunately, the answer is no. And I redirect the parent to go back to the school and meet with the principal. And then I reach out to the parent later and ask, has everything been taken care of? They're like, oh yeah, the principal was great, or the principal gave me a lot of information that I was just totally unaware of. And that's that communication piece that is missing sometimes, because sometimes we unfortunately wait until things become really bad to try to address it. So first step is meet with the school principal, or if it's a classroom issue and you have met with the teacher and it has not worked out, definitely meet with the principal or assistant principal or whomever is in charge of that particular department. I want to make sure on the scale of how accountable teachers for evaluating students for suspension. And now teachers, as a matter of fact, one of the things I know at Evergreen and at other schools that I've worked at, we will also look at teachers and say, okay, we're going to bring you in for additional professional development when it comes to addressing student issues. So that's to be determined by the principal or admin team at any particular school site. We are offering trainings from student services as far as creating videos and face-to-face meetings when we can do so safely, with as far as professional development when it comes to discipline. Recently, as recent as 2 weeks ago, we've included paraprofessionals in this conversation. Ms. Owens, I think you can relate to this. A lot of times professional development didn't really reach out to paraprofessionals as much as it did to teachers. But if you look at one of the new things that come out of the pandemic, paraprofessionals are now sometimes in the role of being in the classroom and addressing a lot of issues that normally they would not have to address in the past. So we are helping paraprofessionals professionally. There are schools with higher rates of OSS, office discipline referrals, and ISS. And free lunches, are we training teachers? Yes, we are. To answer that question, we are training administrators and teachers on alternative methods of discipline. We are having those conversations now. PBIS is one of the things that I firmly believe that's the positive behavior intervention support system of better helping schools look at different ways to motivate students and to address discipline problems. If you are new here today, okay. I was just reading the different things in there. My problem with OSS is the student misses the classroom learning 3 to 10 days. They are robbed of up to 2 weeks of learning. And yes, that is true. When they are suspended from school, they are missing 3 days of learning, and we have to play catch up. The thing about a student being suspended that I want to make sure that people are aware of is when they are suspended and they're missing those days of school, when they return, it is the responsibility of the students and the teachers to get together and to make up the lessons that they've missed. Now, let's be realistic about this. Is it the same as getting the initial instruction? No, obviously it's not, because you start looking at when are teachers going to be able to make up a 2-day suspension or a 3-day suspension, or worse yet, a 10-day suspension from school. We are really in letting people know that a 10-day suspension, that's a lot of time away from school. And so that infraction has to be very, very serious in order for that outcome to occur. They're looking more at in-school suspension programs, but even with in-school suspension programs, that child is no longer in the classroom with the teacher. That child is in a different setting. So the learning is going to be slightly different, even though it will still be ongoing. But there are times when a child has to be removed from a classroom setting because the behavior is so severe that while that child may lose 3 to 10 days or ever how many days of learning, if that child remains in the room during that time period and we are not working on ways to counter that behavior, the other 18, 19, 20, or however how many is in their classroom, they are being robbed as well. So it's a balancing act. You have to be very careful. And that's why I say suspension is very powerful, both if it's done correctly and if it's done incorrectly. If it's done incorrectly, you got the problem returning in 10 days because it hasn't been addressed. It's just been temporarily removed. So when you suspend a child, ideally you should have a reentry plan for that child and for the parents. Definitely you welcome the child and parent back to the setting, but there should be a reentry plan of some sort where, you know, you talk about how you're going to make up the education that was missed. Once again, those are conversations. I've had parents actually come to me and say, okay, I understand my child was wrong and he had to endure X number of days of suspension from school. What are you going to do to help my child? And I was like, wow, that's a great question. I'm glad you put that on the forefront, because now I have to respond to that and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And you may say, well, should you be responding to that anyway? And the answer is yes, you're right, it should be, and always have tried to. But when you look at how things work within a setting and how you're dealing with one student today, then there's another student tomorrow, there are a lot of moving pieces. And it helps greatly to have gentle reminders that, hey, don't forget my child. And, you know, once again, we love to assume that people would know to not forget their child. But to me, it's very similar to having a family member in the hospital. If you can visit, and COVID kind of changed the way that works. But pre-COVID, when you were able to go to the hospital and visit a family member who was not feeling well, you had conversations with the doctor, like, you know, hey, please take excellent care of my family member here. Don't forget they have this medication. And you're talking to the expert who knows about medication, but you're reminding them, please don't forget they need to take their blood pressure medication or whatever the case may be. Same thing in the school system. The experts know what they should be doing, but it definitely helps if people are involved with them saying, hey, my child is coming back to school. This is what's going on at home. We don't have to hear the real personal details, but if Johnny woke up and Johnny had a terrible day and he's being defiant, you had to physically pick him up and place him in the car. And then when you got to school, you had to physically take him out of the car and you got him into the front office. It helped me a lot when parents would tell me, hey, look, he had a miserable night last night. He's not in the best mood today. Be on the lookout for that, Mr. Livingston. And I would pay attention to that student a little bit more during that day because I was given a heads up by the family members. So there's a lot of back and forth that must take place between school and home. But the reality is not all homes will do that. And I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. I'm not blaming people because there are circumstances that I don't even want to imagine having to be in. But as an adult, whether I'm a school official or not, I have to see these things. And sometimes I would see them coming through the car line. I'm like, oh boy, mom, daughter, father, son, or, I can see them arguing in the car line. It's going to be a rough morning. So let's get them to the guidance counselor. Let's get them to a certain person on campus and try to prevent some problems from occurring or transferring over to the school setting. And unfortunately, sometimes things are so upsetting to a child and they don't have the ability to control themselves. We have to assist them. And sometimes we're not even set up the system. We have to get outside help. Sometimes the centers are involved or outside counseling. There's just a lot of complexities that go on. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm making excuses. I just want to be upfront and honest and speak heart to heart with you because, I was asked a question one time when I was principal at Lakewood High School. And Miss Francine, I don't know if you can recall, I shared this with you at one of the SAC meetings. I was at the question, are there drugs on your campus? And my response was, do you recall what my response was, Miss Francine? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but because that was a long time ago.
It really was, and I don't remember.
My response was, I would say yes, but there are probably drugs on the campus. And people were like, whoa, wait a minute. You think there's drugs on your campus? I would think there were drugs on every campus in school. And here's why. You're talking about thousands of students walking in and out. If I stuck my head in the sand and just chose to ignore it, saying, no, this is completely drug-free, there are no weapons, no drugs, then I'm not looking out for the safety of the entire school. I'm not looking to see if there's signs of it occurring on the campus. So for me to better protect the school campus, I didn't want to stick my head in the sand, nor did I advise anyone else. Don't just blatantly say there's nothing on your campus. And I can give you a bad example of, or a good example of this. When I was dean at Bellevue Middle School, one of my duties was to coordinate with the sheriff department in bringing in the dogs to search school lockers for drugs. And I remember being new to the position, how are we going to get the dogs onto the campus? What is the best entry point? And, the thought was I'll just bring them through the main parking lot. Well, here's the truth. If you bring those drug sniffing dogs through the main parking lot, probably at your local churches, and this is not to say anything negative about churches, I'm just saying, bring them through the local churches, the dog will probably alert on someone's car. It doesn't mean that the owner of the car is a drug user or anything of that nature, but it's possible that there could have been a passenger at some point. You could have been driving on your way to work and you assisted someone who ran out of gas. You gave them a ride to the local gas station and back to their vehicle, and out of their pocket dropped some sort of pill or marijuana or something. Unknowing to you, that substance is in your car. Somehow you become a search or a dog alerts on your car and you're like, how did that get there? I'm not a drug user. No, you're probably not a drug user, but unfortunately, sometimes things like that can occur. So what I'm saying is we have to be very careful and strategic in how we conduct searches and how we look at things, because sometimes it's not always what the eye sees. You have to really do a lot of investigating. I'm looking in the chat box.
Are there any questions that we sent you yesterday?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Yes, I'll go to it. I saw something just now. And wow, I really like this. It says, every child is a prodigy in something. It is our job to discover what it is. And once again, I go back to, not everyone will test well, but it doesn't mean that they are lacking in ability. Not everyone will go to college, and it doesn't mean that if you go to college, if you don't go to college, that you're a failure. But we as adults, we have to be careful how we are talking with our children about their futures. And so when we say, hey, you must go to college, but that child is telling you, hey, I really want to become a welder. I really want to become AC repair person, and I want to go to a trade school instead. what is wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with wanting to learn a trade. And I've witnessed students when I was at North Marion High School as a teacher who they may not have been the best readers, but they can tear a motor completely down and rebuild it from scratch. And I'm looking at them like, how did you learn this? How do you know this? They had that skill set. And some of them are now in that profession and they're making a great living at life. So we have to be very encouraging of students because there is something that every child is great at. Has the district developed and implemented innovative strategies or programs to increase parental engagement to assist students with the achievement learning decline that has occurred during the pandemic? Well, that is under Title I. And Title I is a federally funded program that basically is responsible for parent engagement. And through Title I know we've always worked through Title I to involve parents in our schools at Evergreen, Fort King Middle, when I was principal there, Lakewood High School and other schools. We use Title I funding to get parents involved. Outside of Title I, as a school-based administrator, you realize that your success really is hanging in the balance because you must engage the community. And if you don't engage the community, you start losing out in terms of educational opportunities for students. So we will have various events. In terms of innovative strategies now, I don't honestly have an answer, and I will contact Ms. Boston to find out more about what's new due to the pandemic. You know, we used to have a lot of face-to-face in terms of people coming to the school and being actively involved in events. And not only would the events be, you know, about education for students, but also we would invite people from the community who did things such as resume writing for parents, because some of our parents were unemployed and they didn't have skills when it came to resume writing or interviewing. So we had those people there that night as well. And we would provide babysitting services on the campus while the parents were able to go from class to class to receive whatever information they felt was important for them. But now with the pandemic and the mere fact that we're having a Zoom meeting now, the way of the work has changed. And so I honestly don't know what new innovative strategies or programs have been instituted to increase parental engagement, but I will find out. But I know right now this Zoom is pretty good because for parents who don't have transportation, but yet they have a computer at home, they can do so. This is one way avenue of being involved in schools, school activities. Also, the school system in Marion County has been pretty good about technology and sending home Chromebooks or computer tablets. And in remote areas where internet, they don't have internet, the school system has been pretty good about sending home hotspots. And I know this from firsthand experience because as I travel from school to school, I see them when they're collecting the hotspots or the computer device, and they have definitely been used. They've been used. And so these are different tools that are innovative in terms of getting them out to the communities. I think years ago, you would not have seen so many computers go home with children because everybody was learning on campus, but now there's a lot of devices going home. There was a question regarding how many students have dropped off the radar. I'm going to assume that probably means how many students are unaccounted for. That's a very tough question to answer because the numbers vary from year to year in terms of students. So how much has been impacted by the pandemic? I would say probably a lot has been impacted by the pandemic because now we added another variable to why students are not probably on campus. And here's what I'm really saying. Marion County has a very transient population. It is not unlikely to hear about a student attending multiple schools in their elementary career. I have dealt with students who have been enrolled in 8 different schools or more in some cases during just their elementary career. And whenever I would see that, I'm like, we really got to work hard with this child because they've never had a chance to develop relationships on any particular campus with teachers and their peers, but not only that, their parents haven't been able to develop any relationships as well. And that becomes very challenging when trying to educate children. So we have a very transient population. And unfortunately, if the rent is due and can't be paid and you live, let's say on the west side of Marion County, and you can't find dwelling on that side anymore, so you have to move to the east side, that means you're probably gone from Denellen Elementary School to East Marion Denellen Elementary School to East Marion Elementary School. So that means you move clear across the county. You run into financial situations there. You move in town. You're renting in town, and so now you're at Wyoming Park Elementary School. So we have a very transient population. When it comes to the pandemic, how many students are unaccounted for? Well, it doesn't mean that they're not being educated. They could be enrolled in homeschool, and we may not know the numbers of students who are being actually enrolled in homeschool because parents haven't declared it officially. Some students have been removed from public schools and placed in a private school setting, or some are involved in Marion virtual or Florida virtual as well. So it's really hard to peg exactly how many are absolutely off of the radar or unaccounted for, because these students, even though they may not physically be in a brick and mortar setting, they could still be involved in education in some way, shape, or form. Recently, we had a meeting here at MTI with parents of students who are habitually tardy or absent from school. And we talked again about the importance of being present in front of the teacher. And at the end, I met with one family, a mother and her children, and she was sharing with me that her problem with getting the child to school was due to the pandemic. Her husband had to take a job being a long distance truck driver, but she has to be on the road with them, and they don't have family here. So that means the kids have to be with them as well. And, you know, I tried giving her different resources and so forth. But for her, it was, we just can't get them to school every day. What else can we do? At that point, I realized for her particular situation and for the sake of the kids, perhaps they are going to have to do Marion virtual school or Florida virtual school. She's going to have to homeschool them and do it on the road and get a device either on her own or through the school system if she chooses to do Marion County online, and still educate the kids, because the focus was how can we still educate those students if they're not going to be in the school setting. And for her, it seemed like it was the only plan that was feasible for her and her family, and for the sake of her children, to still keep them engaged in learning. I can only hope and pray at this point that those students are actually still learning and not just riding in the cab of a tractor trailer truck from state to state. But the takeaway for me was walking away from that. If I didn't tell her about the ability to homeschool and to use Marion virtual or Florida virtual, then the students would just be in the back of that truck going from state to state, not learning anything. So I'm hoping and praying that she took that information and she went to homeschool, and she's educating the kids and having a homeschool professional teacher from Marion virtual, Florida virtual, assisting her. Let's see. Ms. Owens, I know this would come from you because your heart has always been helping those students who struggle the most. And even though they don't necessarily always struggle the most, they do struggle a lot. And that's the EBD setting. And that's yes, ma'am?
It did. It came from me. Yep.
Yep. The emotionally behavioral disturbed classes. To answer your question, honestly, I don't know how they're really performing on with virtual classes. I would say it probably will vary from student to student, because with the students who are in this particular situation, the emotionally behaviorally disturbed students or disabled students, it's not always an academic problem with them. It's sometimes just purely emotions. They can be very, very intelligent and do really well. And I'm quite sure there are some who are really flourishing in the virtual setting because they don't have all the stimuli around them to distract them. And then there are some, they're probably struggling, but I don't know what the actual numbers are, or, you know, or to what degree their success is occurring. Are there EBD students still being sent to different cluster schools in the county? The answer to that is yes. EBD students are sent to certain schools based on the resources available to best meet their needs. Everything with a student who is in the Exceptional Student Education Program revolve around the individual education plan, which also is called the IEP. The IEP, or individualized education plan, drives education for that child. So if it says that child needs to be in an inclusive setting, then that's what's going to happen with that child. But yes, the answer to that question, there are still clusters around the county where students attend based on the resources that are available. And the reason why that has occurred is because when you had EBD students scattered all over the county, and you have a county like Marion County, which is basically the size of the state of Rhode Island, it was very hard to get resources to all of the schools to meet the needs of students and with certain disabilities. So it was designed to better meet the needs of the students.
Mr. Livingston,
Yes,
we
ma'am.
so happy and you are so gracious to, we've had you here for almost an hour. I just want to pose one last question, but before that, I do want to take a moment of personal privilege and tell you that I have been so, I'm so grateful to have spent those years at Lakeware High being a parent advocate with you. You truly, you walk the talk. You truly want to work with the student and the parent and the teacher and have that kind of inclusive cooperation. And I'm just saying, I just want to take a point to say that I for one am grateful and thankful because you took notice of my son and you helped him flourish. And now he is spreading his wings, and he's so tickled when I tell him that I tell you of his all of his of all of his remarkable. But I want to leave one last question, if I may. I know you're not as knowledgeable as to Bridges Project, and I will share with you our website and to anyone new here and Bridges. We want to share what we do. We've been in existence for 5 years now, but if we can, how can Bridges Project, which as you see are mostly grandmas and grandpas and stakeholders here in this county, how can we encourage parents to advocate for students, and how can we help bridge the disconnect between students, teachers, staff, and parents? In your opinion, in your humble opinion.
Right. In my humble opinion, when you have these sidebar conversations at the ballpark, when you're watching your grandkids participate in T-ball or whatever sport they're participating in, when you're out shopping or after church services has been completed or prior to church services, if you just have drop simple gems of wisdom to these individuals. I mean, conversations, you cannot underscore conversations that can be held that would benefit other people. An interesting thing about conversations is that, when I think about life in general, I've asked this, and I'm gonna get back to your question, Ms. Francine. But when I think about life in general, let's say I'm in Walmart, I start to realize that my mouth could be the difference between that cashier going home and doing something right, or that cashier going home and doing something terribly wrong. And let me explain what I'm saying with this. I shared with my students, you don't know what someone is going through at the time you're interacting with them. And here's a very graphic thought. You don't know if someone is having such a bad day that they may be thinking about ending it all. And something as simple as, hey, how you doing? Good afternoon. Even if the cashier doesn't speak back, I said my piece. I said, hello, how are you? Thank you. Now, sometimes I do catch myself, I'm in a bad mood and I'm like, Wayne, you got to check yourself, because by me simply saying, hello, how are you? That could be what that person needed unknowingly to say, hey, life isn't that bad. And it's the same thing for children. When children wake up in the morning, we got to greet them. We got to act like the world is, I did not know as a child that I was living in Harlem and it was a terrible place, because mom and dad did not paint that picture as like a terrible place. They paint the picture like, we want something a whole lot better for you. You need to get out of here. You need to move on and, do some things. But it was not wake up in the morning and gloom and doom. And, kids need to know that it's not all gloom and doom, and parents need to be reassured that it's not all gloom and doom, because as adults, sometimes we can feel hopeless and feel like it's all bad. And we just need to communicate with people, whether it's in the barbershop, hair salon, and the Marion County Public School webpage. I discovered myself, and I work in the system. Wow, it is loaded with information. And simply going to that webpage, you can look across the top and you can pretty much navigate it, and you can go to these different places and find out valuable information that can help you within the school system. Having conversations with teachers and principals. Don't be intimidated by their degrees. Do not allow a degree on the wall to intimidate you. I tell people that all the time. Just go in and have a conversation with them. They put on their pants and clothing the same way you do. And as a matter of fact, just so you clearly understand what I'm saying, there have been numerous teachers who are parents who have come to me for advice on what am I going to do with my own personal child? How can I teach and I'm looking at them, I'm like, you know what, you're right. Because as a father of two boys, well, they're men now, I struggle with the same thing. Why? Because parenting does not come with a manual. And that's not, you heard that before. It is on the fly learning. Yes, there's some fundamental things about parenting that should be in place, but they're not always in place. And we can't assume that every person knows what to do. Mr. Mack, the other day, you said something that was very powerful, and that is, some of these parents don't know what to do. How are we going to help them understand what to do? How are we going to help them? And unfortunately, in some situations, parents have been raised a certain way, and it is generational. So how are we going to break the cycle? Well, I'm telling you, people listen a lot to what you say, and they watch what you do. And to break the cycle, you're not going to do it. Opinion alert, okay? I don't think it's going to be done with a special program. I don't think it's going to be done on a mass scale. I think one at a time, one person at a time. Every time you come in contact with a person, if you can give them something that they can hold on to and go out and share, that will spread faster than, let's say we're going to plan a special event on Monday night and have so many people come in, because you're only going to have, let's say, I'm going to exaggerate, 500 people come in, 500 people get information, 500 people go back out. You can only hope and pray that 500 people spread that to thousands. But if I can get one of you to come in and become passionate, and one of you to go out and spread it, wow, I don't know how many people will hear it and how that message would be, delivered and the advantage of it. Is one person at a time. And I really believe this because 34 years involved in education, I have kids, well, I can't call them kids because I'm 57 and some of them are in their 50s because I started at age 22. They come to me and they tell me things that I've said back in 1986. Coach, hey, coach, you remember you said this? I'm like, oh, Lord, what did I say? I hope it was right, because I was only 22 at the time and I'm not sure. And they tell me what I've said and I'm like, oh, thank you. They remember. And they also point out things that I've done. They're like, Coach, you remember you did this when this happened on campus? And I'm like, wow, you remember that. I think a lot of you can relate to that too. You can remember things that your teachers or adults that you were around did, and they've forgotten about it. They've moved on. So, hey, I really appreciate your time today. And I feel kind of bad that I kind of went all over the place, but you're welcome to call me or email me, and I'll give all the information to Miss Francine and Mr. Mack, because when I tell kids, when a kid would ask me, so why you act like you care, Mr. Livingston? I would smile at them and look at them and I would tell them, hey, I'm very selfish. This is why I care. In 30 years, and I've been using this for the longest. So in 30 years, of course, I'll be 87, but when I was younger, I used to say in 30 years, I will be this age. How old will you be in 30 years? And it should be so funny because the kids will scramble like, I didn't know it was going to be a math test. I'm like, I'm just asking you, how old will you be in 30 years? And when they tell me, oh, I'll be 30 something years old, I'll be 40 or 50 something, I will look at them and say, okay, who's going to be sitting in the power seat then? It won't be me, it'll be you. And chances are I'm going to need you to repay this favor to me to help me. You might be the one injecting me with a needle with medication, and I don't need you to be shooting air bubbles into my veins. You might be the one pulling me over. I need you to treat me with respect. You might be the one giving me CPR. I don't need you looking down at me and hesitating because, I'm not sure about this guy. So I'm investing in my future by investing in you. And that's what it comes full circle. And I think people forget that it comes full circle. And I tell teachers constantly, hey, you're going to see this kid again one day. You better hope you did right by the child. You better hope that you have given that child
all the time. You say that all the time. I remember.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So anyway, thank you all for this Saturday morning. I really appreciate you. I really do.
Thank you so much for coming in. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
You have the floor.
Have a wonderful weekend.
It was wonderful listening to you. Your years of experience and knowledge came out in every comment that you made. You can tell that you have had heartfelt feelings for a lot of the kids that you have mentored along the way. And we all hope that all of our kids get mentors like you when they're in school. We have to admit, there are a lot more good teachers out there and good mentors than we really think about. Yes. Because, our kids are exposed to this on a daily basis, and we can only hope that those types of experiences and the knowledge that you shared are shared with not only the children that you see on a daily basis, but the parents, the young parents, some of them really young, much younger than we were when we all became parents. So we have to remember a lot of what we see are kids raising kids.
Yes.
And that seems to be one of the reasons why it's so important to stay involved in a lot of these kids' lives because of that, to just show them direction. So yes, we appreciate everything you do and that what you continue to do. Now, I think Francine asked, is there anything in particular that you see that Bridges can do as a community organization to help get the word out there, or to help you in what you do, or to help the kids in our school system?
Yes, I would say Bridges as an organization, if you can connect with various school principals, and it's just something as simple as introducing yourself as an organization. Because I can tell you, as a former principal, whenever an organization approached me, I knew there was a group of people that really were concerned about students, and I knew them to be, they became a resource for me. A case in point, Kiwanis Club. Wow. Once, I became familiar with them, and I started inviting them to the campus to participate in various events. When we would have our monthly celebration of student success, no matter how big or small, but just celebrating their success at Kiwanis, instead of me being on the stage talking about it, I would have a member from Kiwanis or the community come out and talk. And that meant a lot, because I don't know about you as grandparents or parents, how many times have your child looked at you and said, well, you're supposed to say that. You're my mother, you're my father, you're my grandmother, you're my grandfather. Well, students would feel that way about me sometimes. Well, Mr. Livingston, you're the principal, or you're the teacher, you're the coach, you're whatever. You're supposed to say that. But when there was a visitor on campus who expressed love and concern and appreciation for them, they was like, wow, this is a stranger coming in, a guest. And they shared that with me. It was powerful. It meant a lot. And if you can definitely help with students, kindergarten through third grade, especially K2, kindergarten through second grade, That is very critical. Those are those formative years. Those are those years where we start losing a lot of kids. But if you feel more inclined to help the older kids, definitely get on a high school campus and just, mentor some, get involved with talking with school officials there. Of the 3 levels, elementary, middle, and high school, I found middle school to be very rewarding because if I looked at the students like Clay, they were very moldable. They hadn't formed their opinion so hard that you had to break them to reform them. And they weren't so young to where they would just squeeze through your fingers. They were very moldable. But elementary school is so critical. It is so critical, kindergarten through 2nd grade. So if you can get into those classrooms or, I don't know, talk about innovative technology or innovative strategies, maybe get involved in Zooming in. I don't know. But just to see a face from the community that shows that someone cares outside of people whom we think are supposed to care because they're paid or they're family members, very powerful, very powerful. It's that Walmart syndrome in my mind. This lady or gentleman at the cash register, they don't know me from the next person, but I smiled and said, "Have a great day."
Got it. Got it. Well, those are good words of wisdom, and we shall look into it. I think Mr. Mack does an excellent job through his public education working group. So, and start trying to stay in tune with what's going on in the Marion County public school system. So we'll continue to do that. Now, Barbara Feitos, you had mentioned something about the Public Policy Institute, PPI study.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Livingston is very, very intimately engaged with that as well. I'm on the board for Public Policy Institute, and the new study on childhood development as it relates to early intervention from pre-K up to the middle school years. Again, the idea is to curb the cycle of violence among our youth. It's a 2-year study. We are probably almost a year in, and I would encourage Bridges to actively take a part in this as an organization, because the breakout groups are starting in terms of the individual working groups, and there is an opportunity for individual engagement, and again, representing Bridges as a whole. Many of you may have already been involved in some way, shape, or form, but I would encourage, as an organization, that is one very, very concrete way to engage. Many of the topics that Mr. Livingston talked about today are absolutely ones that are going to be covered and shared. There's an enormous amount of interaction and collaboration that can come out of this, and the Bridges voice would be very important in that conversation.
Yes, yes.
Great. So then I'll depend on you, Barbara, to
I will make sure you get information in terms of the overview.
Get us more.
And in terms of the meetings are all still on Zoom. We're meeting every other week now, and the working groups are going to start splitting out. There's one on, there's probably 4 or 5 of them that are going to be split out. And again, you can engage in ones that it's your area of expertise or just simply your area of interest. So I'll make sure that we get that out to everyone in our newsletter and whatever, so that people can start engaging as they see fit.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I think that's definitely the way to go. Did I see someone else's hand up earlier? No? Okay. I see Peggy, Reverend Peggy, why don't you go ahead and give us an update, if you will, on chain breakers, on the SA awards, and so that we can be on top of that.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we have had 57 SA submissions, which is the largest number we've had so far. And the breakout, according to Jill, and she couldn't be here today, is 7 from Bellevue, 40 from Howard Middle School, 9 from Lake Weir, and 1 from Vanguard. Pat Keith and Delphine Herbert are doing the evaluation of the essays. We are penciled in to give the awards at the school board meeting on May 25th. And so that will be, I'm sure, available on Zoom for people that can't be there. I don't know what numbers they're limiting us to, but the award winners and their teachers no doubt will be invited to attend, as well as parents. And I'd just like to say this is our third year for an essay contest, and it is expanding and developing and growing, and it's so wonderful. So thank you, Pat, for grading these essays, and Delphine also. And it will be fun for us to read the winners' essays. I'm sure you all will have those available. We'll put them out, and we all can be blessed by that. There'll be a news release I'm sure that Delphine will send out. And so this is something for us to see as an accomplishment of Bridges. And thank everyone that's participated in that.
Peggy,
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
Peggy,
Pat.
could I just make one comment about how important I feel after having read most of the essays, how important I feel it is to commend the teachers of those students for encouraging them to participate in this essay contest, because there's clearly teaching involved. I can see terms and attitudes through the writing of the students that we can thank the teachers for. Somehow we have to let them know how important it is that those young voices are heard.
Thank you, Pat. Did someone else have something to say about that?
Question, what is the theme this year, or the question of the essay this year?
Oh, I don't have it exactly in front of me.
I do.
Do you? Okay, yes. Pat, please read it exactly. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the question, Francine.
The prompt that was given the students is as follows. On January 6th, thousands stormed the US Capitol in an effort to deny formal certification by the Congress of the results of the November 2020 presidential election, as determined by the Electoral College. Was the frightening scenario that ensued a protest or an insurrection? What is the difference? Which actions of participating individuals are subject to criminal prosecutions? What was the role of law enforcement that day? Going forward, what options are available to resolve the issues dividing us? Is there potential for civil discourse? That was what the students were asked for their responses.
Yes. Yes.
That's a
The answers will be very much, yeah, it was in depth. It was more soul searching and information gathering than other questions we've had in previous years. Although they could have been taken to depth, and they did. The winners did take them deep before. This invited that, and it's exciting to see the number of responses to those series of questions.
Wow, what is the deadline?
The deadline was the end of March.
Right.
And so the grading is happening, and these are the 57 essays were received by that deadline. And interestingly enough, I think they all came in the last 2 days.
Yeah.
So we were a little concerned we would not have a response, and we're very pleased. And none came late. So everyone that submitted met the deadline. And so Pat and Delphine have been very busy since last week.
And let me commend Reverend Peggy. Reverend Peggy chairs our Chain Breakers working group. And for those of you that are not familiar, the Bridges Project actually has, I think, 5 working groups. And each working group takes on a project and or an issue, as it were. The Chain Breakers, as you heard from Reverend Peggy, what they're working on, there's also currently going on an Our Story event, I guess you could say, project, where members of Bridges, as long as they have been here, have been asked to submit a 1-page brief, I guess you could say, a history of why they came to Bridges, what do they expect from Bridges Project going forward. So we've asked several of the members to submit those letters, and I think we've gathered, what, 20 something so far letters that will be published.
It's higher than that. Vanessa, do you have that number? I meant to look that up before our meeting today.
I know it's quite a few.
But
But
interviews as well.
Vanessa, you have to unmute.
In addition to the chain breakers, we also have the public education working group, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with. That's what Miguel Mack oversees as the chair. We also have the monument group, which Gorham has been responsible for in going forward. And Sharon has been actively involved with that, Sharon Pliska. And then which one? Oh, we have outreach and mobilization, which does a lot of our outreach in the community, events and that type of thing. And which one am I missing?
Affordable housing.
Oh, yes, housing. The housing project hasn't really gotten off the ground yet because our chair, the chair of the housing project, has not been all that well. She kind of suffered some setbacks, health setbacks going forward, Claire Cassius. So, but each of those working groups work as a part of Bridges, but individually on their own as well. So just to give you an idea, Mr. Livingston, that's how we kind of have spread ourselves out to try and take on a lot of different issues. And the last one, the one I'm forgetting, is engaging law enforcement. And actually the Bridges Project had done a report, a community report, which was published and given to the law enforcement agencies in Marion County to tell them what the community felt about their policing. And if you're interested, I'd be more than happy to make sure you get a copy of that report so that you can see the work that went into it. And we did get a positive response from the Ocala Police Department on that report. So I'll make sure that we get you a copy of it, okay?
Thank you.
Let's see, any other working group? We've heard from Miguel with public education. Gorham couldn't be here today. He's not well. And as I said, Claire has yet to get the housing group off the ground. So we really haven't, but I'm going to interject here, not as an independent working group, but just to make sure all of you are aware. The Bridges Project is still on schedule to sponsor a opening Juneteenth event at Master the Possibilities. On June 17th in the evening, we will be sponsoring Kimberly Wilson's One Woman Journey at the Cultural Center. Involved in that evening's performance is also going to be the gospel group that Sarah Ibarra was able to confirm for us. They're going to open the evening for us. And then we will close out the evening with a poem from Professor Amira Sims. So we expect to have a very nice evening performance. Now, this is to open the Juneteenth here at Master the Possibilities. So the next day, that Friday, Reverend Chandler's exhibits are scheduled to open. So far, everything's on schedule. I haven't heard anything yet. So his exhibits are scheduled to open and will run the entire weekend, from what I understand. People will be able to come in and see his exhibits. There will also be some classroom classes going on at the same time, all focused around Juneteenth and African-American history. So yes, Vanessa?
If none of you know, your mouse will not work on a glass tabletop.
Oh.
You have to put it on a piece of paper, and I keep forgetting. in the April 7th newsletter, we got the information about the Ocala Juneteenth celebration, but there was nothing about the one on top of the world.
Not yet, not
Okay,
yet.
that's what I wanted
As a
to know.
matter- Yeah, they're working on the flyer now.
Okay.
Now that all parties have confirmed their participation, they are working on the flyer, and I should see the draft sometime this week.
Okay, that's
So
all.
once the draft comes out and everything's approved through their marketing, then it will be published, and it'll be sent over to our outreach and communications so that we can get it in our newsletter as well. So.
And if I may interject, I did speak with our actress, with our talent, Kimberly Wilson last night, and she is looking for flights. She is fully vaccinated, and she is anxious to come and share her talents with us. So I'm asking if anyone is interested, Webfield, which is the Juneteenth celebration on Saturday. Is there anyone that would be willing to work the booth with us? Bruce has already said that he is willing to. So we're putting it out there. We have set, we will be on, they will be on Webfield. Sherrington Houston, who is one of the coordinators, is anxious for Bridges to, join the,
Yeah, make sure we get that in the newsletter so that we can ask for volunteers. Yeah, that'll work out really well. Yeah, absolutely. Bruce was also supposed to be at today's meeting, but he sent me a little text. He is working on pulling together the nominating committee such that we can have it in place for the May or June meeting at the latest, so that we can have elections of board members. We have 2 spots that are open, which will require elections. And then, of course, there's a couple of members, I being one, and I'm not sure who else, are coming up for renewal. So once the election of the board members are made, then the board itself elects who's the next president. So if any of you are interested, you're members and you're interested, please make sure you can email either of us and let us know, and we'll make sure we get that information over to Bruce, okay? Any other announcements before we, anyone else have anything they'd like to announce?
Yes, Marcy has an announcement regarding possible judicial appointment, and I can put the information in the chat.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Marcy.
Leanne Mackey Barnes, who is the assistant supervisor for about 16, I think they're public defenders here in Marion County, has made your short list for the judicial appointment for county judge, the 5th Circuit. The vacating judge is Sarah Ritterhoff Williams. If you're interested in making a recommendation for her, she'd greatly appreciate it. Francine will put the link into the chat room for you. This is 5 of them that are up, and I think she's number 4. And she's waiting now for the next interview. And all recommendations will be appreciated. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marcy. Yeah, I made sure that I tried my best to get it out to as many people as I know to support her. We'd really like to see the young lady from our community be placed in that position. It's not like she hasn't deserved it. 19 years she's been around here, so practicing law. So I think she's earned that position, really. And right now it's going to be in the governor's hands, I guess. He's the next one to interview her. So any other announcements? Francine?
Okay, I'm taking off my Bridges outreach hat, and I'm putting on my hat as district secretary to a Representative Yvonne Hayes Simpson from District 20. We are proud to announce that on Wednesday, we did a massive vaccination event at New St. John's Baptist Church. And we vaccinated the J&J shot. Oh yes, by the way, our president was there and her husband. I am proud to announce that we vaccinated 500 of our county residents. That is huge, that is huge. Rep Henson hiked right down to the governor's office because I asked her to, I love her. And I am working on another date on a Saturday because I have been scrounging for people, different vaccination spots with, all of it. I've exhausted the state log-on websites. I've exhausted Publix. I've exhausted CVS, Walgreens, Publix, Heart of Florida. There are very few that cater to working people that cannot go during the day. Therefore, I am working on a date either on a Saturday, either April 24th or May 1st. I am waiting for the confirmation nod from the governor. And I would love it if you can help me get the word out as soon as I have a date, because it is essential that we have our community vaccinated against COVID-19. You know that is personal to me because I lost my father. And in January, he was begging me to get him a shot. And I feel that we did not have enough available in January, because now we're finding out the obvious reason that the shots were down in South Florida. But the shots are here now. I am on the phone constantly with the Preston from the Marion Emergency Services, and with Mark Linder and anyone that I can get a hold of to make sure that we have proper places for people to be vaccinated. So Saturday, either April 24th or May 1st, please let me know if there's anyone that needs to get their vaccine. I am willing and able to help with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francine. Yeah, I know that's very important to you. Anything else for the cause? Any other announcements? No? Well, I can't thank all of you enough for sharing your Saturday morning with us. Again, thank you, Mr. Livingston. Very, very important information. I really appreciated you taking the time to spend and share with us. Thank you, Mr. Mack, for doing all the work and keeping in touch with Mr. Livingston as well. And please, the rest of you, stay safe. Shots, no shots, please stay safe. Practice those safe guidelines. We still are in a pandemic. We're not totally out of it yet. So I see Mr. Livingston has his hand up. Go right ahead, Mr. Livingston.
Once again, thank you very much, everyone. Leanne Mackey Barnes, by the way, she was one of those students that I had the privilege and fortunate opportunity to have at North Marion High School when I was working there.
Turn your mic up, we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Leanne Mackey Barnes, she was one of those students that I had at North Marion High School. She was on the track team that I coached, and I've been in touch with the family throughout the years ever since I first met her. And she's one of those examples of what I told you about the 30-year investment. I hope I don't need her service because she's a public defender, but I'm so proud of her. And she's a fine example of, you just never know where these kids are going to end up. And she's in the power seat. And also Bridges and everyone, thank you very much for what you're doing. You're very powerful, and you're making impacts. And if I ever could be of a resource or a service, just let me know. Reach out and let me know.
We most definitely will. You are now one of our resources, so be prepared. So thank you, everyone. Please have a good rest of your weekend. Be safe. Take care. Remember, it's your sphere of influence that you have to share all this information with. So please do that. Have a great weekend, everyone.